Hello, everyone. So, this is going to be another video on the Reddit anti work movement, sort of. But it's mostly the main misconceptions I see around people who are opposed to capitalism. And as someone who is myself not opposed to capitalism, but of the opinion that it needs reforms to fit the modern era, I feel like there are there's some really tired tropes. Okay, that to put it simply, there's a lot of tired tropes in populist rhetoric, whether it's from the right or the left. Now, I consider myself to be on the left, but only because I believe in equality of opportunities and secularism instead of having things like a standard state religion or a standard state skin color or anything like that. And I also don't believe that there should be things like inherited wealth and, you know, generational aristocracies and stuff like that. And that's inherently like, that makes you, if you don't support traditional, more traditional norms and values, then I feel like that makes you a left winger. But populism, I think, is different from actual uh populist talking points are often just that. And it's almost like a trap where people get caught in these loops. And because there is only limited truth to them, they never actually amount to anything because they can be argued away. So, I guess I'll start with the first major misconception I see, which is that the United States spends too much on military. Okay, now, the idea that the United States should spend less on military and start giving more to its people and entitlement programs and stuff. Well, there's the whole first of all, one major misconception, little known fact. The United States spends more money on Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid and food stamps and all that stuff than anything else. Most of the government's money goes to entitlement programs as it is right now. It just costs a bloody fortune. Things cost a fortune in this country. So, the reason why you also can't use the military spending dollar figures, let me ask you, how much does it cost? How much does an American pilot make? And how much does a Chinese pilot make? So if the Chinese want to fly a MiG and we want to fly an F-16, flying the F-16 is going to cost hundreds of times more. The manufacturing is going to cost more because it's in America and not China. The pilot's going to cost more. All the people on the ground are going to cost more because you're in a richer country. Switzerland, for example, I'm sure per capita spends a ton on its military just because it has to pay all of its people to be conscripted. And Swiss aren't poor. So, what's the metric you should use? I think percentage of GDP makes more sense. How much of the country's resources as a percentage are going to the military? And when you look at that, the United States is ranked like 20 or something. I think we should be ranked number one because I don't like other countries having more powerful militaries than us. So I think we should be spending more on military than any other country. And Because if China and Russia have more powerful militaries, the world starts to go to shit. Taiwan starts going to shit, Ukraine starts going to shit, Finland, Hong Kong, the Korean Peninsula, Vietnam. So that's one of the first major misconceptions, is that the United States could just spend less on military and more on education and entitlements. It doesn't work like that. The United States government already spends more on those other things than it does on military. And the military budget is stretched pretty thin because, believe it or not, it was Republicans, House Republicans, who cut the military budget because they were sick of the deficits. That was during Obama's years. And it really hurt the military really bad because it just costs more to do things in America with Americans. So it's really not a question of, you can't look at the nominal dollar figure, okay? That's my main misconception. I'm not saying it's a misconception that the US should spend less on military. That's an opinion. The misconception is just that the United States spends so much on military, and because we spend more than the next 18 countries combined in a nominal dollar figure, it's like, yeah, we're the largest and richest country in the world. I mean, the only countries bigger than us are China and India, and they're poor as hell per person. Cost them pennies. So here's the main thing, guys. The main theme of this video is that there isn't a giant pile of money hiding somewhere that the government can just give to everybody and it all evens out. There is not enough money for everybody. There just isn't. When you look at how much UBI costs, you can see that. Just giving citizens $6,000 a year or $12,000 a year costs more than all the government's tax revenue. There's not enough money in the whole system for everybody to be rich. So the idea that we could all be rich, but all the money is going to billionaires and the military, is just not true. And I can demonstrate that with math. Just do the math. Take all the billionaires and all their money and divide it by the amount of people there are and see how much actual wealth the billionaires have. And it's not enough. It's not enough. The last time I ran these numbers, if you took all the money from all the rich people in America and gave them to the poor, everybody would get a check for about $4,000. $4,000 per person. That's a lot of money, but it's not going to solve the economic inequality issue. It's not like you'd be giving everyone $400,000. The way people talk, it's like the way people talk is that there's all this money sitting in the sky and the rich people have it. Now here's the thing, guys. Rich people can get obscenely rich, but they still own a small percentage of what it would cost to get everybody what they need. So think about, like, let's say you have 100 people, right? You can have 100 people, and if one guy takes just one cracker, let's say 100 people, they're eating a meal and they're in prison and they all have 10 crackers, right? And the guy takes one cracker from everybody, he's going to be so fat and gorded. But that doesn't mean that if you took the billionaire's money and disseminated it evenly among everyone, they would still be going hungry. It's just that the elite class, they manage to control most of the moving and investment capital. But the volume just isn't there because there's just too many people. So, for example, McDonald's. You can look at how many employees McDonald's has and then how much their CEO makes. And you can see how much, even if McDonald's went without a CEO, so even if that was possible and they could get a CEO for $0, they would still only be able to give their employees like less than $1 raise each. Because there's so many employees. There's so many people. There's so many people. Your brain can't understand how many people there are. So when you see Bezos with $50 billion, do you know how fast that $50 billion evaporates in Medicare? How much Medicare, how far does $50 billion go for Medicare? They spend that in hours. Not hours, but still. So the other thing that I kind of see a lot is the idea that everybody is making the idea that people, everyone who's working, basically just, I guess those are the main things that I wanted to speak out against. Because guys, the more you talk about just, oh, well, just take the money from the military and the billionaires and give it to the people. That doesn't work. The numbers don't add up. So as long as that's your solution, it's not going to get implemented because people know. People, when I was in politics, people like me and who worked in the CBO office and all that, look at the numbers and do the math and realize, oh, well, the money's not there. And like I said, guys, it was House Republicans who killed the military budget during the Obama years. And you can see what it did to the military. They didn't even have, they were running around, they had Humvees without armor on them and stuff. So, you know, the idea that the United States shouldn't have a strong military, I don't know, man. I know I agree that we shouldn't waste our military overseas like we used to, but to say that because of some abstract metric, we should have a weaker military than China and Russia because it costs us a lot more to do the same thing because we're richer. A richer country has to spend more per capita on everything. Every last little thing. So, moving on from that, I don't know, guys. I feel like for me, I think that there's some level of responsibility for making very, very low wages into your like late 20s and beyond. Now that's I don't mean to say that goes for everybody. But I think that every person should be getting more, should be developing. You should be learning and improving if you're unhappy with your wage. If you're not unhappy with your wage, then there's no problem. But I see people on Reddit, there's so many stories of like, I've been making $14 an hour for 20 years. And guys, like, everybody I know, everybody, including myself, who stops making more money, like your hourly rate is going up and up and up and up and up, and then you plateau. It's because they stop improving and stagnate. And everybody has that limit that they're going to hit where they stagnate. But I feel like a $14 an hour job is fit for young people entering the workforce But if you're still making that after 20 years, something was wrong. Like, that wasn't all out of your hands, I feel like, because there's so many skills that are in demand. So, for me, like, the main reason why I don't make more than I should or could is because I'm not, I like to do other things other than work too much. I like to write, I like to make, I like to do random Godot stuff, video game stuff. But like, if I had been working on my work skills after work every day, getting a new skill, learning things, I would be, I would have all kinds of crazy skills by now. But I don't, because I'm not unhappy making, enough to survive. But my point is that if you're making 14 an hour for 20 years, there's something wrong there. I don't know a single person who, there's just no way that you wouldn't become more valuable over time as you're learning things, as you're improving. And if you're not improving, then yeah, you better be okay with your lot in life. Like, for me, I don't ruthlessly improve and study anymore, but it's because I'm okay with my lot in life. Kind of. I still am improving, though. You should always be learning. Always. The major misconception, I guess, is that you should get a raise without learning anything new. Just for longevity. Like, oh, well, I've been here for 10 years doing the same thing, so I should get more money. No, your skills become less relevant over time as technology displaces them. So you need to stay on top of the curve, ahead of the curve. And the major misconception is that somebody could develop, could work on career improvement and develop skills and never see any payoffs for that and have it all go to the higher ups. No way. That's impossible, because you could just move companies. Think about accountants, lawyers, like, you can't imagine an accountant making minimum wage because it just doesn't happen. So, if you're unhappy with making 14 an hour, then learn it, start doing accounting after work. Learn it. Get better, because there's no money falling from the sky. You have to make it. That's the main misconception, guys, is that the company doesn't have magic money to just give you for nothing. You have to output. You have to be worth what you make. Otherwise, the company will go out of business. So you, the employee, has to be making at least as much for the company as your wage. Ideally more, because the company has all kinds of other costs. So it's like, whose fault is it, really? Whose fault is it? I don't blame employers for paying market rate for labor. I think my opinion on it, guys, is that we should just have UBI and taxes. So I believe in universal basic income, but I don't believe in corporate wealth, like corporations just paying everybody more. That wouldn't work. They would go out of business. Another major misconception: labor is the biggest cost for most companies. So most of the money for most companies goes to the people. People are just insanely expensive. People are expensive. Even minimum wage people are expensive, because the money doesn't drop from the sky, guys. So every single hour you pay that person, they have to be doing some kind of output. And, you can look at companies' margins. Any public company, You can look at their margins and you can see, yeah, their expenses go to their employees, their expenses go to their people. So it's just this idea that there's this cloud of money that the elites have. And like, for me, the problem with the elites and billionaires is that their level of wealth is disproportionate to the amount of work they've done. And it's also just distasteful. Like, so, but what I mean is, that doesn't mean that taking all their money would solve the problem. It's like, oh, tax the billionaires. Okay, that still wouldn't get us the revenue that we need, even if you tax the billionaires. So, you know, I don't mean to get all conspiracy minded, but it's kind of like these arguments stay so stagnant. Like, I've heard the same tired arguments for 40 years going back. Bernie's talking about the military nominal dollar figure without accounting for differences in cost and stuff. Like, and it's almost like it's almost like these useless, these impossible, ineffective solutions that don't have the math check out are almost like promoted in the rhetoric so that there's never a real solution. I don't know. But the real solution, guys, the real thing is that there's a real problem. There's a lot of people and scarcity. There just is. So you can look at a tiny amount of people having a bunch, and yeah, that's annoying, but that doesn't mean that they have enough to give to everybody else. It's not like a king in the castle with starving peasants. You can just look at the numbers. And when you look at the numbers, okay, so the whole thing, like 2% of the people control 95% of the wealth. Well, that's because a lot of Americans are in the red. Like, they don't have any wealth. And the idea that, there's just a lot, guys, Like, I get that it's hard to support yourself and survive on a low wage, especially if you have children. But it's like, those are your choices. Those are your choices. Like, what your work skills are, those are kind of your choices. And yeah, like, working sucks. That's why people get paid to do it. But it's not fun to learn like hard work skills most of the time. But man, I mean, if you're capable and interested in if you're competent, you should be able to make money easily, because I know so many I know so many people who aren't even that smart. They just made a bunch of money by just hustling. They learned accounting. They learned chemistry. They learned something. You don't have to be very smart. You just have to put in the time and the work. See, I know that, so I don't complain. I don't make a ton of money. I don't have a huge house on the hill. I don't drive a nice car. But I don't complain because I know it was the choices. I know that I could hustle and bustle harder if I wanted to. But you have to be worth. Instead of asking how much is my employer paying me, ask how much are you worth without the company. Just your skills alone. What do you bring to the table? Does the company make money off of you? Like, does the company break even off of you? And, you might start to realize that the reason why you're not making more is because you're not worth more. And so nobody can pay you more without going out of business in the long run. So the wage is where it's at because you're being paid what you're worth. And that's the most anyone can pay you. That's how I look at it. And yeah, I think that I understand everybody who has problems with how the labor economy works and the misbalance between employer and employee in the labor economy. I get all that. I get it. But the point is that I want to solve those kinds of problems with UBI. You can't just force the company. What are you going to do? Force the company to pay its employees more than those employees make the company? I don't know. Or force the company to give all profits, like to not give any profits in dividends to shareholders, so then the company doesn't have any capital, any credit. Where does the company's credit line come from? Where does the company's, like, the economy, capitalism? I call capitalism crapitalism. Okay. And yeah, capitalism is really crappy, but that doesn't mean that there's some pie in the sky shining solution out there. It's the best solution we have so far. And if we want to replace capitalism, we need something better. We can't just have these fake solutions of, well, just force the billionaires and the companies to fix it. Okay, well, they can't. They don't have enough money. Even though they have so much, they don't have enough. So what's after that? People need to be worth more. You need to have a country with very valuable citizens, and America does. Do you know how many smart people live in this country? It's inhuman how many smart professionals live in this country. So that's the other misconception, is how many people are making horribly low wages. Like, it's not most people who are poor, guys. It's a minority of people who are really poor. So, if you don't have enough money to eat, you're in the minority in this country. Most people have health care, insurance. Most people have jobs. Most people make enough to survive and make ends meet, even with kids. Those are just the numbers. So how are you, you have to take that into account. If you're one of the people who's upset about the system, you have to take into account the fact that the system supports a lot of people better than any other system that we've seen in other parts of the world. There's nowhere that's richer. So, except for, what I mean is the non-free world. Because I'll end the video with another major misconception, and that's that the Europeans aren't capitalist. If you think Switzerland and Sweden and Norway and Denmark aren't capitalist, you don't understand anything. I'm sorry. They are extremely capitalist. They're not socialist. At least, not in the way that you would think. Like, a lot of them, like Switzerland, for example, it's quite libertarian in a way. Like, it's like libertarian left, not authoritarian left. Sweden never arrested all of its billionaires. Sweden never put its CEOs in jail. Sweden never raised corporate taxes to an insane level. Instead, they woo corporations and they support things like strong labor unions and stuff like that, and high taxes. But that's like another way of running it. The real reason why those countries are well off isn't because they have some magical system of government that's better than anything anyone else has thought of. It's just because they have a ton of resources and not that many people. And they're just rich as shit. They're just rich. They're just rich. It's like Singapore. Like, whatever they do is going to work out well because of how rich they are. It's kind of like, if you're the Netherlands, how can you fuck it up? Sorry for my language, but it's kind of like, it's like, what would Denmark and the Netherlands and Switzerland, they'd have to be so corrupt and mismanaged to make their countries look bad or their people look poor off. Because they just have an insane amount of wealth and resources for the amount of people they have. And that's because they played it smart for like 500 years. So anyway, I hope that this video, like, the solution is to have more valuable people who have valuable skills. Because if all somebody knows how to do is pick strawberries, you're never going to have, it doesn't matter what you do to the rich, because picking strawberries is only worth a certain amount of money. So I think that what needs to happen is stuff, education and universal basic income, so that people have the room. What I don't like about capitalism, I'll end the video with why I feel like a lot of capitalism is crap, is because it traps people. A lot of people, you don't have the opportunity, you don't have the space to be able to learn a new skill or go back to school, because you won't eat if you do. Like, you're living paycheck to paycheck and all that. But a lot of that is, is planning and not having kids when you're not ready to have kids. That's another big one that you don't want to do. But my main point is that I do think that the government can do more to give people room to improve themselves, because it's hard to improve yourself if you're just treading water the whole time. It's like, you're just trying to keep your head above the water. So we do have enough money to get hardworking people out of those situations, which is why I'm a left, I think the government in America I still don't think it does enough. So I say I'm on the left because I want the government to do more. But I don't think that there's some magic pot of gold like Smog the dragon with a giant pile of gold. It's not there. The pile of gold isn't giant enough. So, cool, everybody. Thank you. I hope I made some sense here.